Hello and welcome to another episode of the Data Sense podcast. This is the show where you learn from technical and business leaders how to connect business and data to develop your own sense to drive your business forward. Today we have Mansoor Rahimat Khan. Welcome, Mansoor. Mansoor Rahimat Khan is the co-founder and CEO of Beatoven.ai. He's also a professional sitar player with 17 years of experience in the recording and live music industry. He comes from a family of musicians which goes back 7 generations. He's an alumni of Georgia Tech Center for Music Technology and has worked across several startups such as Great Learning, Tone Tech, ToneTag in tech and product roles. Mansoor also co-founded and was a part of several music tech startups in the past, such as Emotify and Eggpad. So, Mansoor, tell us, you also have a background in AI. You also have a technical background, and so today's podcast is quite an interesting one. We actually learn from your business experience as well as your technical experience. Tell us about your technical background. Where did you start, and where are you right now in terms of your technical background?
Right. So, technology was a field that I was always passionate about, right, from my undergraduation days. And while I was doing my bachelor's in electronics and communications engineering, and when I was in my third year, I was very fascinated by the space of music, being representative in the form of signals. So that's what kind of got me intrigued. Okay, I mean, music is something that we hear, we feel, and experience, but it's also a whole science that goes behind it. And there's this sweet spot at the intersection of music and technology, and that field is called music technology. And that's how I started exploring the space further. I got into signal processing, and those were the days when we would work in MATLAB, so this is, I'm talking about 2014, 2015. And just started exploring, and machine learning was there, but deep learning and all of these frameworks were like pretty nascent back then. And yeah, so I got started there. I started doing small projects, so I went domain first rather than machine learning or technology first. I mean, I was clear that I wanted to work inside this domain of sound and music, and I started picking interesting research problems in that space. And then through that domain, I started exploring technology. So it started with very simple signal processing techniques, then it went on to understanding about machine learning, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and then slowly moving towards deep learning. So having started since college in third year, now it's been almost 8 years I've been in the space. I have published a few papers, I filed a few patents, and mostly like all of them are in the space of AI and sound and music. That's basically how it has been. And that has eventually led me, along with my co-founder, to start a company in the music technology space, which is right at the sweet spot of AI and music, where we are building a tool for making music using artificial intelligence. So yeah, so that's basically what my journey has been like in this space.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah, machine learning is in the most recent, uh, I guess, most recent times, deep learning has really taken off. Deep learning has really gone. It has become so famous. It's unbelievable, and it has been the reason why machine learning or AI has become famous, because obviously the simple machine learning algorithms were always around, and they were already being used to a certain extent, but the algorithms were probably not as easily accessible. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And with that, you also worked on other startups and other sort of similar backgrounds to, I guess, signal processing and music.
Right.
Tell us more about that. Was that also in? Were you using AI there as well, or signal processing? And how does that, bring you to your current startup?
Right. Not all the startups in music that I was associated had everything to do with technology. Like, so EDMOFI, the startup I was associated in my college, that was just a media news website, where we would go cover events, uh, like like very famous, popular electronic dance music events. We would go, we would give coverage, and it just blew up. After a while, we got like more than 100,000 followers across social media platforms, a lot of website hits, people reading our content and stuff like that. But that was a very different kind of an experience. That was more on the business side. But yeah, from the tech side, like in terms of AI, so there was a startup that I was working for in India, in Bangalore, where we were using artificial intelligence for making payments through sound. So how do we like make payments through sound waves? And that was a very interesting problem. That's where I actually dug down deep to understand deep learning, because it was a pattern recognition problem essentially. And when you get into that, so we did a lot of understanding. Did a lot of research on understanding how um, you know like audio content recognition systems work, like algorithms like Shazam, for instance, like where you have like a piece of music, but it accurately detects and tells you like, okay, this is that song, and using that as the premise, then moving forward in that direction. How do they essentially? I mean, that wasn't they did that algorithm back in 2004, but today we have such an advanced way of doing all of these things in pattern recognition. So we have things like computer vision, where you can analyze waveforms and spectrograms of audio. And essentially, what I'm trying to get at is, through those research experiences while working at startups, while working at sound tech startups, and on interesting problems, that's how you delve deeper into understanding why is it that we need to use deep learning for these kind of complex problems, essentially. And yeah, from there, I got a good hang of the various concepts that are associated in deep learning. And one of the best courses that I highly recommend everyone, while you're being an AI practitioner, is the course by Andrew Ang on Coursera, which is definitely, like, if you want to understand deep learning in depth by from the mathematical side of things and implementation side of things, everybody should do that course. In my opinion,
Yeah.
big fan of that course. But yeah, like going forward, so my co-founder essentially was a much better tech guy than I am, and that's the reason why in my current startup I'm the CEO and he's the CTO. He essentially has been working at the intersection of deep learning and audio for the past 5 years, and also a master's in sound and music computing. So we both kind of got together and we decided, okay, we are going to be building a startup that will be a deep technology startup, where we will pick a really, really hard problem and try to solve it with, some of the most fascinating technologies that are there out there in today's times. So the problem that we went after is fairly a business problem, which is basically content creators, people who create videos, podcasts, and all kinds of content. They keep requiring background music all the time. As you are also a podcaster, I'm sure you're aware of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But then there are issues that you can run into, where with regards to copyrights, with regards to takedowns, and all of these kind of stuff. So we identified that problem and said, like, can we use the new age technology of AI and solve this problem effectively in a way that content creators can license music which is created on our platform, which is a business problem. But the way it is being solved is by using a fascinating deep learning technology, for generating music essentially. So it's a very new space in terms of legal aspects, in terms of a lot of aspects. There are no right answers and wrong answers to it right now. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say here is, we picked a big business problem, and we are going after that business problem using some of the latest deep technologies that are out there. So
Hmm.
that has led us to where we are in terms of our startup journey today.
Right. Yeah. That's quite interesting. One thing you mentioned about Andrew's course on deep learning and I guess artificial intelligence. It's really interesting. I He also mentions this really interesting phrase, AI is the new electricity.
Right.
And what's really funny is that being the new electricity applies in more than one ways. One thing I've noticed is that in the early days, electricity was also not easily available, right? It was also not uniformly available to every person of the society. Only a few big, large companies had access to it. And another thing was that there was no consistency. So there was all sorts of different, like AC, DC, different voltages, all sorts of things. Every company just coming up with their own standards. So it's a bit like that. But then all of a sudden, electricity just becomes standard across at least a whole country or continent. And then electricity also is available to everyone. And I guess that's one way I'm seeing that, you know what, AI could be similar. Right now there's all sorts of algorithms that everyone keeps coming up with, but we're not actually just getting to the standards just yet. That's something I felt really that's quite interesting.
Right.
um, and yeah, and you also mentioned about the background on deep learning, solving that sort of like sound processing and I guess signal processing, as well as generating new music. It's quite interesting. I read an article quite recently, which was about music, or generating music is one of the easier things in AI or in deep learning, and the reason for that is um, there's only a number of different combinations that you can choose from the sort of different notes, and because of that, it has to sort of fit into a very narrow sort of it unlike the human language where you have, say, in English, 26 letters, right? In other languages you sort of range from 26 to 36 or so, and then you can come up with words from there, and then words obviously create more meaning and all sorts of things, and how you put them together. Whereas music is slightly much easier problem when compared to natural language processing. What do you think of that? What would you say on that?
I mean, if you look at it from a purely technical problem point of view and a computer science problem, so that's the way how you would analyze it. Like, okay, like, I have a bunch of numbers. How do I randomize it and create combinations out of it? And yeah, that's it. I have like all the possible pieces of music in the world. But unfortunately, music is not that. Music is way more complicated than that. There are so many aspects that go into music production, music creation, music expression, and you don't want ultimately, if you're building a product in this space, you don't want your music to sound like computer generated or robotic, because human ears are pretty good at identifying that. You would know, okay, this is a piece of computer generated music. It's nice, it's novel, but I can't use it for my work. So that's where the interesting part comes in. So that is a hard problem. How do you make an AI compose good quality music? And that's a business problem. That's a big challenging problem. So essentially, from what you said in terms of combinations and all, okay, sure, it makes sense. But music is not, a standard framework for all geographies in the world. There are so many forms of music. There are so many different genres of music. There are so many styles of music, and there are so many theories of music. So you have Western classical music, you have Indian classical music, you have music which in the Latam region, which is completely different. You have music in the Arabic regions, which is completely different. So how do you, like, you can't just say that you can pick a bunch of notes and randomize it and create music out of it. So like I said, yeah, it is definitely a very, very challenging space. And because we are building in this space right now, we understand there are so many parts to it that are super challenging. It all begins first from the data set. How do you get a data set that is uh, good quality? Secondly, it is, we are allowed to train our models on top of it, because of the fact that copyrights is a big issue in the whole music space. And then once we have procured it, what kind of algorithms do we build on top of it, that are able to efficiently compose good quality music? So that becomes like a threefold problem. It starts from there. Once then you have made these models and they are able to compose music, how do you evaluate the quality of the music? How do you say, like, okay, this piece of music is original, it's good quality, it is not infringing on existing copyrights, it's not sounding like some movie score that was created in Hollywood?
Yeah.
So all of those challenges are a whole part of the whole process of building a startup in this space. But yeah, like, I think we think about these problems all the time, and some of them are solvable, some of them are not solvable. But yeah, that's how it is. Like, that's how you essentially go about it. Yeah.
Cool. And So the thing is that it sort of obviously goes into the question of can AI generate art that a human will see and say actually it is art, it seems like a human created it, or I can't tell if an AI bot created it. So it sort of goes back to that question, right? So
Right.
would you and what would you say to that then? Is it, do you feel it is difficult? There is challenge in terms of, no, obviously there, it is difficult, but what I'm trying to say is that uh, what level of challenge is there in creation of music or art? It doesn't have to be music, where AI is generating that, and obviously we have seen some simple paintings they AI can do, right? But that's still, you can still sort of tell that it's too digital, right? You can tell. So how do you bridge that gap for AI? Is that more data? Is it just more quality data you have to put in? Obviously, some algorithms you have to sort of adjust as well. But what is the bigger problem in solving, in making AI uh, appear more like human? Because that would also apply to, say, language, right? It will
Yeah.
apply to not only, say, copywriting. If AI is doing writing some like writing an email or something, or writing a letter, or doing anything, and it's the same sort of challenge on how do you make it more appear like human.
Right. So I think the way how we think about this is, I mean, I don't think that just by throwing a lot of data to a model, it's just going to start figuring out and start producing better quality music or art. Or I mean, that's definitely one of the ways, and that's obviously we have models like DALI and all of these OpenAI experiments, which we are all aware of, which have essentially created art by building deep and very large models, generative models, and as you can probably see all over Twitter, DALI generations are like mind blowing. So definitely that element exists. But again, like you mentioned earlier, like electricity is something that was accessible to very few companies. Similarly, that kind of data is accessible to very few companies in the world.
Hmm.
So if you're a startup, you have to find smart ways of doing this. You cannot just rely on data entirely. You have to find a hybrid way of building something that is sounding real, sounding human, but also at the same time using artificial intelligence. So that's something that we have kind of developed at our company. So we don't even if you look at a human, like if you compose music, if you make music or you do any sort of art, it's not like you have seen all the art in the world and you start creating
Yeah.
art. You have a limited set of information, and from that information you start creating art, because that's your exploration and that's your creativity. So that's the kind of line of thought that we also take with regards to machines at our company.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. That's quite nice. I was actually talking to a few other people who are also in the space of AI in the startup world, or not just startup world, but just small companies world. And the thing is that large companies, as you mentioned, have the power to buy data, have the power to procure whatever resources they need. Be it compute resources, be it data, um, whatever. Right? They can just throw data and money at it, and things will work eventually. Whereas small companies or have the basically opportunity to create something which is more cost effective, yet also still as powerful, um, so that it can actually work for lower cost for basically everyone, like all of us, rather
Right.
than just letting big companies have all the fruits, basically. Um,
Right.
and yeah, that's quite interesting with AI and generating music and the challenge of art. How do you generate art? Um, do you feel you actually rack up a huge cloud bill when you're training your models? Is that a problem you experience?
Yeah, so when I was working previously at a startup, when I was doing research on sound and training bigger and bigger and bigger models, it's a huge cost. I have to admit it, because uh, the moment you introduce GPU inside your framework, the bills just explode by 4x or 8x, because GPUs are so expensive, and especially training on the cloud, it can get a lot expensive. So there, we used to have hacky ways of doing it. Like only when we need to train it, we would keep it on. When we don't need to train it, just shut down the server. So that's the way how you find ways of minimizing your costs. And yes, I do agree on it. It's a big expense. Being an AI startup, a big part of your expenditure is going to go on servers and training, and also this is not a problem that is only in the beginning. It also scales over a period of time. When you have more users, you have bigger models, you have more servers running. So it's a bill that's only going to keep going up and up over a period of time.
Cool. So does that mean that the CFO of your company is is sitting there thinking, what are you guys doing? This is not possible. We can't have more. We can't have you spending more money on training.
Yeah, so that's why we didn't hire a CFO yet. So we do it ourselves. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's an investment. If you look at it that way, it's not really an expenditure. If you it's a series of trial and error and several experiments, and over a period of time, then you figure out the right optimizations, the right way of cutting costs and trying to get the best results out of what you have built. So I think that's the cost of learning that you have to pay, to be able to do that over a period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's it's basically you have to pay the cost to learn to discover a new universe basically. Um,
Right.
in terms of you what the work you're focusing on currently, what would you say is the biggest challenge? Is it the technical or is it the business side, um, non-technical
Right.
challenge?
So, business side of things, if you look at, it's an existing market that we are going after. It's not a new market that we are creating right now. So, the market of sync royalties and sync licensing and background music for videos, podcasts, is already an existing market. So, you have a lot of these libraries, which provide you pre-created soundtracks to license and use in your content. But the way we are solving it is in a very interesting way. Our thesis of our company is, you don't need a pre-created library of soundtracks. You come to our tool and create your own soundtracks. So now that is something very interesting. Like, how does somebody who has never created music in their life would come to our tool like us and start creating music themselves? So so to convince people that they can do it, that's the first challenge. So that's a business problem. But on the technology side, uh, I think what we are enabling is we are building an abstraction layer where users can input very simple parameters like moods, genres, duration, tempo, which are things that they understand, and then the output is like a decent quality piece of music that they can download and then start using it for their whatever content they're creating.
Hmm.
So if you see the way, so the technology side is also challenging because how do you build that abstraction layer and keep all the heavy lifting that actually goes into building that piece of music inside the servers and inside the background, but expose only things that people understand on the front end. So yeah, if you look at the UI of our tool, that's you'll understand what I'm kind of trying to say. So definitely business problem, it's validated. We did a lot of research, we spoke to a lot of users, a lot of customers, and there's also validation for payments. People already pay for these kind of services in terms of subscriptions. But what needs to be validated for us is the thesis that we are after. Will people want to create their own soundtracks? Do people really want to um, is this the new way? Is this the behavioral change that we are kind of betting on legitimate, and is this going to work in the long run? Is basically that needs to be phased out for the company.
Cool. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I guess you must have a lot of data engineers and machine learning engineers to basically solve those problems. Do you have a large team, and what do you have to deal with that sort of problem in terms of these days there's just the world is just going crazy with the amount of digital transformation projects required across the world, and then all the companies just trying to poach your talent.
Right. Right. No, so I think that's a great question. I mean, every small startup that is just starting out, your first job is to build a great team because uh, if you're going to go after really large problems and really want to build a disruptive technology, you cannot do it without a great team. And each person that you bring on board, you has to be handpicked, and they also have to come here for the right reasons. So that's very important. I mean, if they're coming only for cash, if they're coming only for the money, it's very unlikely that they're going to stay in the long run with you. Because like you rightly said, like big tech is going to poach them eventually, and no startup can compete with that kind of compensation. But what we do very carefully, and what's been working for us is we do have a team of researchers, PhDs, masters in music technology, people who have worked at the intersection of AI and music, for past 7, 8 years. So that's the first thing that we look at. Okay, like this person is inherently motivated to work in this space. And and closely associate themselves with the problem that we as a company are solving. So when you look at all of these parameters and then you see, okay, like this is the reason that they're joining and they see their careers fulfilling inside this organization, that's when we know, this is the right person that we want on board. So we do have a great team. I mean, I definitely can proudly say we have some of the best music tech guys in the world working with us. But and yeah, and we are really proud to have them. And they definitely, and they themselves are here for the right reasons. They are here because they really want to build a truly exceptional product in the long run. So yeah, so that's what I have to say about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. Especially hiring someone who is already in that space for a very long time. It shows that they're, as you mentioned, inherently in that space, right? They are going to live in that space for a very long time. With that makes sense. But one question on that. India is quite a saturated market right now. So do you see that the salaries are going up in terms of are they going really skyrocketing in terms of and do you feel that that as a problem? I've seen one ad where someone basically posted that, oh, the salaries, at least some companies or some engineers, where some big companies are paying such huge salaries in Bangalore that even Norway is not able to compete. So what would you say on that?
So I think the world is pretty much aware that India definitely has some of the best talent out there. If you look at Silicon Valley, you look at big tech, you'll see the number of Indians that are working in all of these organizations. You'll be just stunned about it. So definitely India has a very good talent pool. And a good thing in recent times, especially this is some change that has happened post COVID, a lot of them have started to stick and stay back in India and work at the organizations here. So the quality of talent is definitely very high. And to match that quality, a lot of startups have started paying at the pay scale, which is like really, really high. So definitely a big problem for small startups like us because we have to then, because it's the same talent pool that everyone is fighting for. It's not like, it's not like a very, very wide talent pool. Because as you probably will agree, there are only a few people who are like those truly motivated who would, keep building and keep going deeper inside technology to build really, really cool stuff. And those guys are hard to hire. It takes a lot of convincing. It takes a lot of conversations to be able to bring those guys onto your team. So I think that's one thing that we focus on. We definitely don't get into that race of being the highest bidder as a company because we know that there will be somebody always who will be able to pay higher than us, in that space. So you're absolutely right that Bangalore is one of the most expensive places to hire right now, and it has skyrocketed
Yeah.
lately. And what you have heard is absolutely true. But yeah, I think there is also talent that is wanting to build in the right spaces and will always try to find companies which align with their values, their culture. Because I think culture is also a very important thing. It's not just about money. A lot of good talent also cares about culture. They want to be in organizations that give them flexibility, that are supportive of their ambitions as well. So that's also a very important factor in my opinion.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. That brings us to another interesting question. What do you advocate um, in terms of technology or maybe business? What do you see right now, and you would prefer it should be better or this should be done differently? What would that be?
Right. Right. I think I can speak for the space that we are in, and so definitely in terms of AI and music. the first threat that every musician, when they look at our startup, they start feeling is like, oh, this is an AI music startup. They are going to start competing with me. They are going to replace me. So that threat is something that I don't agree with. So as an advocate, what I strongly believe in, like, no technology has ever replaced humans. It's just helped humans become better at what they do, and AI is also exactly going to do that. The interactivity between AI and human beings will lead to newer forms of art, newer forms of cultures, and newer forms of things. It's not going to be a competition between a computer and a human, because I don't believe that's even possible. I mean, there are some tasks that can be automated, absolutely, but I think humans are much beyond machines, and I think we have just barely touched the surface in terms of even understanding human beings in general. So
Hmm.
so I feel like definitely all the new forms of technology are there. They will come, they will go. Like every now and then we'll keep
Hmm.
hearing about new tech, but the ones who are building it and the ones who are essentially innovating are the human beings themselves. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's my thought about
that's
it.
a really interesting one. That's something I advocate as well. So, and the sort of reasons I give is basically when you look at the era before the industrial revolution, right? There were only like 25 different jobs. So something like blacksmith, carpenter, um, farmer, and not many jobs. There weren't a lot of jobs available. However, due to industrial revolution and the amount of food being produced so much, the human population increases, and all of a sudden there's a whole new amount of jobs available in the office, right? Architecture and just so many different jobs due to the industrial
Right,
revolution. Just working in the factory and different jobs in the factory where you're just really good at one thing and you do that all the time. And then we also see something similar with when computers came along. When Excel came along, people thought, you know what, it's going to put accountants out of job because Excel does it now. Why do you need accountants? But what's interesting is that accountants use Excel to do their job better. So, and
right,
what's interesting is that actually technology, whenever it comes on, humans are just way too clever. They use technology to get even better. So
right,
it's the same thing with AI, and where AI comes along, AI can, for example, I come from a technical background, you have a technical background, and you can sort of see, right, there's a new tool called GitHub Copilot, which helps people
right,
write code. That's not going to replace developers. That's not going to replace software engineers. And the salaries are not going to
right,
decrease. What's
right,
going to happen is that software engineers are going to use that tool to become even better software engineers. So it's the
right,
same sort of thing where whichever technology or whichever AI powered technology comes on, it's going to enable all those people to become even better at their job. So it's only
yes,
going to improve. And who knows? AI hasn't really sort of come fully yet. It's not fully democratized yet. So when it does, then there will be so many jobs. Imagine, right? Like now, before you used to have car mechanical engineers, but now then we'll have like machine learning engineers, and that would be like a
right,
main sort of job or something. So, or just
right.
debugging AI
In fact,
models. That's like right now we can't
absolutely.
debug those, right? So that's going to be a job.
No, and I would like to add something there. If you look at the kind of new industries that AI as a space has created, so there are companies that are just built on data
Yeah,
labeling. Like then there are companies that are just built on curating quality
yeah,
data, and then there are companies that work on evaluation of models. There are companies. There's a whole new space of AI explainability and observability that has come into space, where they are trying to understand how are these models making the decisions the way they are making those decisions. So as you can see, like just the concept of AI has led to so many side industries which are attached to it, and it's just increasing the size of the market, as an industry as a
yeah,
whole.
yeah. That's it basically. So yeah, that's the sort of thing that whenever someone tells me, "Will AI make my job redundant?" I'm like, it might make manual mundane job redundant, right? That's going to be automated, but there will be better creative jobs out there for you,
Right.
and they'll be so creative, so amazing. You'll be like, you know what, I like that. You'll love that world more than the one you are in right now.
Absolutely.
Cool. So that sort of brings us to the end of the podcast. At the end, I would like to basically mention Beatoven.ai. That's the company that Mansoor has founded and is the CEO of. So Beatoven.ai has recently launched its product, which is available on their website, Beatoven.ai, as a web application for various kinds of content creators to compose original royalty-free background music for their content. So yeah, that's a really interesting product. Um,
Thank you.
cool. Thank you for being on the show, and yeah, we'll see. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.